Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel. We start off today with a rather unexpected and fairly breaking news. Right now there is a very serious situation unfolding in Syria at the moment, and overnight the nation has effectively pretty much collapsed. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was forced to flee his presidential palace, and now he is somewhere, I believe, in Russia, if I remember correctly. And the rebels in opposition have actually seized Aleppo, a few other cities, and pretty much the entirety of the capital city of Damascus. And normally, much like what we saw in Afghanistan with the Taliban, once you take over the capital city, you effectively control the entire country. And that's what we see here. Afghanistan fell after the Taliban took over Kabul, and Syria fell after the rebels took over Damascus, so now they control the entire country. And it appears to be, all fucked up. So, people are already celebrating the fall of Assad's reign. That's a good thing for the country to some degree. Assad was a brutish ruler for the country, and I'm actually very glad that he's gone from the country. While that might be a good thing, on the flip side, you also have to keep in mind that you need to be careful what you wish for, because it's looking like these rebels don't spell any good news, and we'll get into that. So link in the description, archived of course. This is obviously one of the most major developments of this ongoing crisis in Syria that we've been seeing for decades now. And if you're not, up to date with this ongoing situation in Syria, I really don't blame you. Even though it's been talked about in the news a lot, you kind of forget about it because of how long it's been going. Again, this whole situation has been going on for quite some time now. The civil war has been going on for nearly a decade and a half. And, a handful of you guys watching this probably weren't even born when the Civil War first started. And this is why you see a lot of these refugees in places like Europe and Canada, Australia, and all these other places. So here's essentially the timeline of this whole situation. Syria declared independence from France on April 17, 1946, when French troops withdrew from the country. However, since independence, Syria underwent a period of instability shortly afterwards, with numerous coups destabilizing the nation. The Ba'ath Party, founded in the 1940s by Michel Alfaq and Salah al-Din al-Battar, promoted Arab nationalism, socialism, and secularism. And in 1963, the party seized power in a military coup known as the Ba'athist Revolution. This set the stage for the rise of leaders like Hafez al-Assad and his son Bashar al-Assad, who was the current, now former president of the country. Assad, an Islamic Alawite from a rural village in Latakia, joined the Syrian Air Force and rose through the ranks. His military training in the Soviet Union enhanced his skills and connections. This is why the Assad regime has ties to the Russians. After the 1963 coup, Assad became a prominent figure in the Ba'ath Party and aligned with its more radical, military-forced faction. Internal disputes amongst Ba'athist leaders led to tensions. In November 1970, Assad launched a bloodless coup, which is referred to as the corrective movement, ousting his rivals and consolidating power. Assad then assumed the presidency in 1971, declaring Syria a Soviet-backed socialist state under Ba'athist rule. Again, this is why the Assad regime and the Assad family are buddy-buddy with the Ruskies. Upon Hafez al-Assad's death, his son, Bashar al-Assad, who has been groomed for leadership after the death of his elder brother Basil, succeeded him. Bashar's presidency began with promises of reform, but quickly reverted into authoritarian practices, maintaining the family's hold on power. For instance, Bashar al-Assad implemented heavy restrictions on freedom of expression and freedom of the press, isolated the country's economy, and enacts a full rejection of liberty. It's just no surprise that Assad is in fact a dictator. And there are some instances where Bashar al-Assad utilized chemical weapons and acid attacks on his own civilians. So you can obviously tell how ruthless he is. And the Assad family and the Assad regime has held power on Syria for nearly 50 years. And this in turn caused a lot of protests, a lot of backlash, a lot of attempted coups. And in 2011, Assad's dictatorial reign is what triggered the civil war that the country has endured ever since, which is still going on to this day. Between the Assad regime, between civilians, and even rebels and terrorist groups like ISIS and all these other groups, attempting to overthrow and seize power of the country that is Syria. That's why there was a refugee crisis that has went on throughout the mid to late 2010s, mostly in Europe, Australia, and North America. And then recently, and by recently I mean literally this week, just last night, after 13 years of civil war, the regime of President Bashar al-Assad was effectively overthrown. Assad reportedly fled to Russia, marking the end of more than 50 years of Assad family rule. The rebel offensive began on November 27, 2024, led by Islamic group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which is what I'm going to refer it to as, because I'm not going to be saying that entire name for the whole video. So the offensive began on November 27th, 2024 by HTS and other allied factions, including factions of the Turkey-backed Syrian National Army, capturing territories, including key cities like Aleppo, Hama, and Homs, before advancing on Damascus, capturing it on December 8th, 2024. The Syrian government, supported by Russian airstrikes, have responded with intense military action, leading to severe humanitarian consequences. Countries like Russia, China, and Iran have previously supported Assad, but were unable to assist him due to their engagements in Ukraine and with Israel. And of course, China really didn't give a fuck at the end of the day, and they would have had to deal with Taiwan at some point if they were to aid. And respectively so, Assad has done his fair share of military aid towards the Donbass region, particularly in republics like Donetsk and Zaporizhia. Anyways, the lack of support contributed to the swift downfall of Assad. There were also speculations about Turkey's involvement, or at least tacit approval of the rebel operations, given their strategic interests in Syria. The US has in fact indeed noted the events, with President Joe Biden addressing the situation, indicating a focus on preventing ISIS resurgence and supporting regional allies. HTS declared the country quote-unquote free and aims to form a new government, but concerns remain about their governance due to their past affiliation with extremist ideologies. In layman's terms, they are a terrorist organization. This might actually mean bad news for the civilians living in Syria. The renewed fighting has caused massive displacement, with tens of thousands fleeing conflict zones. Civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and water facilities, have been severely damaged. At least 149 civilians have been killed as a result, and hundreds injured since the escalation began. Aid delivery has been disrupted, compounding the already dire humanitarian crisis in the region. The fall of Assad could reshape regional politics, particularly affecting the balance of power involving Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS, and Israel. The internal community, including the UN, has urged all parties to adhere to humanitarian law and prioritize civilian safety. However, with the continued clashes and territorial shifts, the prospects for peace still remain uncertain at this moment. Now, I'm actually glad that Assad is no longer in power. However, I have many reasons to be concerned that it doesn't necessarily mean things are gonna get better. Because the kind of rebels that you have in Syria, the HTS, are not the kind of people that you want to be leading the country. Some of them are Turkish-backed, some of them are FSA, some of them are aligned with terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, and some are literally ISIS. Although that remnant pretty much was snuffed out, actually, and I don't think I've ever heard anything about ISIS in such a very long time. They've been dealt with, and they're pretty much not too big of a threat anymore. Unfortunately, these people are just as bad, if not worse. And I believe that you're about to see a purge of Christians, Yazidis, Kurds, and Alawites in Syria. You might even see some Jews get slaughtered there too. You might end up seeing another Holocaust. And effectively, pretty much a genocide, and unfortunately there's just nothing that we can do about it, at least in the concurrent sense. And Trump has responded about this. He has responded the other day when the rebels first began their advance into Damascus, and what he said was, stay out of it. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to get ourselves involved. It's not our fight. It has nothing to do with us. So we're just going to stay out of it. And I actually agree with that. We should not be involved in the Middle East whatsoever. If Russia wants to defend the Syrian people, that's totally fine. But it's not our fight. Now, don't get me wrong. I do, in fact, feel sorry, though, for all the ethnic and religious minorities within Syria. Because, sadly, they're, about to be like human trafficked and or purged. The Islamists that are taking over the country after overthrowing Bashar al-Assad are just as bad, if not far worse than even his own authoritarian regime. I mean, like, let's look at the nuance here. Hafez al-Assad and his son Bashar are both strong-arm, iron fist authoritarians. Just like I mentioned, Bashar is responsible for shutting down free speech, going after political opponents, his father also did the same thing, and responding to opposition by using deadly weapons on his own people. They are not the sort of people that I would want, for instance, to lead a nation that I happen to reside in. I have no love for the Assad family whatsoever. Hafez was pretty brutish when he reigned, and his son was no different. I don't like his son either, and he is essentially a puppet of the Ruskies. But that is still far less bad than the alternative, which is that you have a radical Islamic faction taking over, and as a result, Islamofascism within the country, and hundreds of thousands of people are purged. And unfortunately, I believe that's what's going to end up happening. I feel like that there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering in Syria over the coming years. And obviously you can tell this is not the first time something like this has actually happened. This has happened before in Iraq, Libya, Yemen, and Egypt included as well. Like when Saddam Hussein fell in Iraq, a lot of people, including the Iraqi civilians, saw this as a good thing. Finally, the country has been liberated and free from dictatorship to democracy. Mission accomplished. And unfortunately, it turned out that the alternative was just as bad, if not even worse, than when Hussein ruled over. Same thing in Libya. And this one's actually more recent. If you remember with Libya, this happened 10 years ago when Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown. A lot of people expected there to be peace, and people saw this as the country finally being effectively free from tyrannical rule. However, that never ended up happening, and in fact, the exact opposite of peace ended up happening. And something much worse was able to take over, leading to the subsequent attack on Benghazi. I wonder who can be responsible for that. I mean, it shouldn't be no secret anymore. With all you've been seeing, Israel v. Gaza, the ongoing crisis in Syria, what we're seeing in Libya, Iraq and Afghanistan, Turkey can be included. You can even add Russia and Ukraine to the conversation as well because it's the Black Sea. All of this warfare has been going on for such a long time. The whole Eurasian steppe has been seeing nothing but human warfare for far too long. Not many people understand this. It's just been nonstop warmongering with, territorial shifts and whatnot, and it's just going to continue. Many people think it's because of 9/11, and a lot of people would like to point the finger on Israel, especially the From the River From the Sea crowd, pointing to their so-called imperialism as the reason for all of this. But not that many people realize, unless you happen to follow foreign diplomacy and history, not that many people realize that humanity has actually been fucking around in this region and killing each other over this one strategic region since the dawn of man. Ever since the end of the last ice age, there's just been so much fighting in this region ever since. Because this one region, the Eurasian steppe, has been rich of trade routes, fertile soil, and a bunch of crops and goods and natural resources, which is exactly what a human society needs to thrive. All the basic necessities of humanity include fertile soil for crops, actual crops, trade routes, and other goods for trade. Trade and goods are the building block of human civilization. And because of that fact alone, this is why so many civilizations in so many empires were fighting over this one region because of the plurality of trade routes like the Silk Road, the fertile soil from the Fertile Crescent, the Tigris and the Euphrates River, ancient Mesopotamia, and amongst other things, is the reason why a lot of empires like to fight over it. It was once controlled by the Persian Empire. For a while, it was controlled by the Greeks. The Egyptians also had their reign. The Roman Empire especially. The Byzantine Empire, the Mongols, the Ottoman Empire. This region has seen major conflict by different factions and a bunch of different empires throughout history, all due to its strategic position and importance. And especially in the late 19th century, there was also a lot of fuel that was found in that area as well. With the burgeoning Industrial Revolution, fuel became very important for an industrial society, in addition to all the other goods and natural resources that allows for a human civilization to be functional. The Middle East was able to tick each and every single one of those boxes. So whoever controlled the Middle East and the Eurasian steppe, at least through puppet states, or through colonies and protectorates, they were the big kahunas, and ergo, they could control everything. After World War II, the British Empire began to collapse because of all these different colonies were declaring their independence, and they were fighting for freedom, and they were saying fuck the British and things like that. And so what happened was that the US snuck in alongside the Soviet Union on behalf of their respective allies during the Cold War. And that's exactly why we have situations like the Gulf War and the war in Ukraine, and even the Soviets being involved in Afghanistan as well. The US was not the only country involved in there, just so we are aware. It's just been complete non-stop chaos and destabilization, not even centuries after the Ice Age. Hopefully, the incoming Trump administration, and I can't even imagine that the timing is coincidental, by the way, I'll get into that. Hopefully diplomacy will break out, and there will be a restoration of some basic degree of order in that region, ensuring that people that, are helping, and in many cases, just civilians, including little children, are not killed off. And not just in Syria, but also in Lebanon, Israel, Iraq, and elsewhere in that whole specific region that I'm referring to, Eastern Mediterranean. The Trump administration will probably be able to, and should be able to, manage that form of meaningful diplomacy. And that's pretty much why I really do not think that this timing is in any way coincidental. I mean, take a look at what's been going on in this world as of lately. All around the world currently, malignant adversaries that oppose Western interests have been thriving. And they're doing that because they're taking advantage of a very thin period of time where Western leadership is effectively non-existent. There is no US president at this moment. Is it Joe Biden? The dude obviously is demented, he doesn't know what state he's in half the time, and doesn't even know what year it is. Is it Kamala Harris? Well, she got wrecked completely. She didn't know what she was doing and effectively caused this mess as VP, and now she's essentially hidden. Our de facto commander-in-chief currently is Jill Biden, more than anybody else. Because she's, Biden's partner, and she happens to be actually mentally coherent most of the time. It's like with Woodrow Wilson, where his wife was the one being the de facto president because her husband was having all sorts of health problems and was completely incoherent. So it's sort of a similar situation that we're seeing right here. So all of our enemies like Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, the Taliban, Hamas, the Syrian opposition, and whatnot, and they are an enemy, by the way, just to be clear. So all these enemies are taking advantage of that power void, hoping that way they can be able to set themselves up for negotiations once an administration comes in that they actually have to rendezvous with because they're genuinely terrified of them. Why did it take Ronald Reagan getting elected for the Iranian hostage crisis to finally end? That's the point. That's essentially what's happening right now. Trump, by the way, would have prevented all of this from happening. He comes out and says, don't get involved, but diplomatically speaking, I'm sure that the US would have been involved at least in some form, and this would not be happening right now, should we had our way. Unfortunately, we didn't, and we do not have competent leadership at this time. We have a commander-in-chief that basically can't choose what color socks he has most of the time. Like, seriously. Like, if the Taliban retaking control of Afghanistan after abandoning a bunch of weapons and leaving 13 soldiers to die wasn't enough, botching the entirety of the withdrawal completely, and this whole situation is all on Biden. Like, seriously, how is this man commander-in-chief? How is this the leader of the free world? How is this guy in office? Why did he win the last election? Why did people vote for him? How is he not, eating goddamn fucking banana pudding and drinking prune juice in a nursing home somewhere, right? Watching the old folks shows and the soap operas and whatnot. Why doesn't he, get to relax and go to bed like he wants to? You know what I mean? Like, seriously, there is just no way that this was the right person to run our country. Like, I'm sorry, like, there's just no goddamn way. Like, this is the guy who should be the one, carrying around the nuclear codes, right? Ready to keep democracy and liberty and freedom safe at any minute. Like, look at what's going on in the world ever since he became president. So, unfortunately, in this lame duck interim period for the next month and a half, roughly, the Syrian people are going to be weeping with sorrow, because there's going to be a lot of people killed as a result. The Islamists that took over, if history is any indicator, will go through. They will forcibly convert every Christian, every non-Sunni Kurd, every pagan Alawite, every Yazidi, anyone and everyone that they don't happen to like at the point of a blade to the neck. And anybody that doesn't convert or refuses to, of course, would end up getting killed by them. So I don't necessarily see order being restored almost instantaneously. This will most likely take some time. Once all these forces are able to get together and they are able to enforce its will across the nation, which may or may not happen, of course, I don't think this means that the civil war is going to end. It more than likely probably will still continue at some level. Once these people manage to consolidate power, and after purging a bunch of people, they will start to form a new government, and it will obviously not be a democratic one. It would be both unilateral and autocratic, and then we're going to end up having no other choice but to negotiate with them. This does not sound like a good reality whatsoever. And I genuinely and sincerely do feel sorry for the people of Syria at this moment. It's really just a scary situation that is unfolding here. And don't be surprised if we end up seeing another refugee crisis in Europe, North America, and Australia. Now, hopefully Trump will probably be able to be capable of navigating those waters. In fact, I think he will, because he doesn't just go in and threaten people and then, not do anything about it shortly afterwards, like an Obama or a Bush or even a Clinton, and certainly a Joe Biden. But, the current administration is not capable of managing the situation. This administration is way too inept. So Syria has fallen. The good news, obviously, is that Bashar al-Assad is no longer in power. The bad news is that the alternative might end up being an Islamist faction of some sort. They're taking over now. This news was so unexpected. This happened really quickly, and nobody even saw this one coming. But I suppose, we should have probably expected this in some way, shape, or form. I mean, throughout this current administration, with what's been going on in this world, even though this was unexpected news, this whole situation was still, entirely predictable. And, you may have already noticed this. When a U.S. presidency or a U.S. leadership or any other major nation's leadership is outgoing or is non-existent, weird shit tends to happen in other countries, especially in countries that they are personally involved in. Afghanistan, Russia, Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, and now Syria. Now, my hope is that the people of Syria can finally achieve peace. The whole civil war finally comes to an end and that things stabilize, and the hope is that you'll have a new form of leadership eventually that is capable of governing things and maintaining at least the very basic level of order that is not an Islamist or another Assad. That's just the hope there. Will that happen? I'm not entirely sure. But if they're able to have at least a stable government that is able to maintain order and not have any of these situations happening, that is not in any way authoritarian, I think things should be fine, but, I don't know. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the little notification bell. Be sure to follow me on all my social medias. Links are in the description below. Share this video around with your friends, families, boyfriends, girlfriends, enemies, whomever. Definitely helps me out a lot, helps the video grow, and helps grow the channel if you were to share this video with whomever you know. Obviously, this is a very serious situation. It is clearly major news, and at the same time, this is ongoing, so I'll be sure to share you guys some updates on my Twitter/X, which I will leave in the description down below, as well as in a pinned comment. You can also send me some news tips, video ideas, and whatever else you want me to cover in a future video. I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date about this because I'm your news guy. That's what I do. Try to keep you guys up to date with the news going on in the world and as far as internet drama is concerned. So I'll be updating y'all on X. I'll be updating y'all here. It's also why you should subscribe to the channel so that way you do not miss out when a video comes out and you'll still be able to be informed once I upload that video. Keeping you guys up to date with what's going on in the world as your news guy. So don't forget, subscribe to the channel. Definitely helps me out a lot, and it also helps you guys out a lot, so that way you don't miss when I upload. So anyways, guys, like, subscribe, ring notifications, and until then, take care, talk soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. You're awesome.